We are back working on the 75 Midget. Now, if you remember correctly, this thing had come in here because of the clutch line. So we need to put a clutch line on it, but also we're going to put the new heater in it. She had sourced a new heater box because the one that was in it was missing, as well as the heater control valve, and we need to put the associated hoses on there too. Plus, when she had the original carburetor gone through by her normal mechanic, he said he didn't know these things very well. He got it running reasonably well, but it could be better than what it is. But I've also noticed that it is leaking oil out the dash pot. It's not retaining it. Surprise, surprise, a Stromberg leaking oil. Seems like every single one that comes in here is like that. And of course, I also think it was tuned without the oil in it, which means we're gonna have to adjust it. Let's get moving. So being a 75, this is a 1500, which means it's got the Triumph 1500cc engine out of the Spitfire in it. Now these cars were a little bit more difficult to work on because they were never designed for this engine. Now when they updated them to put this engine in here, it was also at the same time that they added the rubber bumpers on here. And in order to comply with the crash regulations of the time, or the proposed regulations, they added these rails here that went up over the shocks to support the bumpers. Because originally, they were supposed to meet, I think it was 15-mile-an-hour impact without damage. But it ended up actually only being 5 miles an hour, so this was way overkill. But that did make the engine bay slightly tighter, but also it uses the Spitfire transmission, so it doesn't fit the transmission tunnel quite the same as the original transmission. So when we go to do the line here, we're going to actually start underneath. So let's get this thing up in the air and get going. So on the A-Series cars, the slave cylinder is mounted right about here on the bell housing, and it's accessed for both taking it off and bleeding it through that plug right there, which is a bit cumbersome, but that's how they're done. Now that plug still exists on the 1500 cars because they never changed the stampings. Now the transmission on the 1500 car mounts the slave cylinder on this side within this little clamp here. That is a clamp. So you loosen this bolt here and slide it out, or actually take the bolt out. So we'll take the line loose right here and let it drain out before we actually take it off the master cylinder. Now it's a really good idea to stick some rags or paper towels down in here to catch any fluid that might dribble out when you take this one loose. And then we can pull this thing out of there. Of course, we took out what was a rubber hose, which obviously was what's supposed to be in there, and we're putting back in the correct plastic line, which is what you would call maybe kind of semi-rigid or semi-flexible. It's going to come up and be looped up pretty high when it goes down there and be pretty close to the bottom of the bonnet. But I would suggest always putting this down in here first, get it through that hole, and then getting this started here. Unfortunately, the line, the way they're packaged, ends up getting like a bend in them that's kind of going not quite the way you're looking to actually do it, so they fight you a little bit installing them. So get this one kind of run up there, but not tight, and then go to the bottom and get the bottom done. Now when you bring the line down here, it's going to be a little bit interesting to get it to line up here, because the way it goes through that hole up there, you really got to pull forward on this line to get it squared up here, and it's going to be hard to get threaded initially. And it's quite fiddly to screw this in there, and the shorter the wrench you can have to work with, the easier that's going to be. Now, of course, looking at this, it looks like it'd be a whole lot easier to put that in this hole and then put the bleeder down here, and it'd be a whole lot easier to bleed it, right? Absolutely, it would be easier to reach, but you'd never actually be able to bleed it properly. The bleeder has to be in that top hole. So now that we got it on the slave cylinder, we can come up here and make sure this is sitting in a nice loop where it's not rubbing too much on anything. Of course, unfortunately, there's not much you can do about the way it rubs on the hole down here, just the way it is. We can tighten this up, and then we can top off the fluid and bleed the clutch. Of course, at the moment, I don't have any help to bleed the clutch, so we're going to save that for later. Meanwhile, we're going to move on to the next job. So in order to replace the O-ring above the needle within the piston here, we got to take the top of the dash pot off. But on this particular car, the air cleaner housing has to come off in order to even get this apart. So, yay. So once you get those 4 screws out there, pull the diaphragm out here. And we'll take this apart and replace the O-ring up inside there. So in order to get this apart, we got our special tool for adjusting Strombergs. I don't remember the nomenclature for the tool. It's not my thing to remember all the part numbers and stuff, but we just turn it until it releases. And we take the little set screw out here, or take it loose and pop that out. Find a punch here that just slides in there. What I do is I like to put my thumb over the top here and just tap it on the ground a few times, which until it comes out of there. There's this little spring washer here, or tooth washer, or whatever you want to call it, clip that holds that. And there's the adjuster and the O-ring. So we just peel this O-ring off, put a new O-ring back on, and put it all back together. So once the new O-ring's on there, make sure you got a little bit of oil in there. Push it down in, and then you got your little star clip there. And then just gonna shove it in all the way to the bottom. So when we put the needle back in, you want to make sure the slot is going to line back up. You might actually want to kind of make sure that it feels like it wants to engage. Sometimes they don't quite like to engage properly if you get that fully in there. This one was no exception here. And then just turn this up here. Now there is a setting, go back to the factory manual and set it, where they say that I think it's going down so many turns all the way up and then bringing it back down so many turns to lean it out. I'll have to double check because I don't remember on the Midget where the starting point is. And of course, as the old good British manuals say, assembly is reverse of removal. But you do have to orient the piston correctly. So the air holes are going to be towards the back side, but they have a little slot right here and a tab right here on the diaphragm that go together to make sure that that is orientated properly. And then don't forget your spring before you put the top of the carb back on there. If I had $1 for every time I started putting a carb together with that still laying on the fender, I could probably retire by now. So now on to the heater installation. Now, the seal that goes under the heater here is not listed in the catalog anywhere. Or at least the Moss catalog. The only one that's listed is the early ones for the earlier box style heater, which likely is the same, but I actually don't really know. I think they changed the material of it, but it seems that these things disappear on these cars, because even my parts car out back didn't have one, just a bunch of crap there from where it deteriorated to nothing. So the earlier seal is currently unavailable. So what I did was I just made this seal. So this, when this stuff compresses to like 60%, it's considered to be airtight. And I just cut it and made it fit into here, and then glued it together, and then glued it to the heater box. So that should suffice. So now we can install this into the car. So I went ahead and drained the coolant out of this thing, took the lower radiator hose off so we could replace some of these hoses and obviously put the heater in place, and found out that, yeah, the radiator is rotten and it's leaking down the edge there. So we're putting a radiator in it now as well. Now somebody had already previously had the radiator out and just grabbed all of this and bent this all up and pulled it out and put it back in. We're going to do it the correct way here. The correct way is you got to take these two screws here out, and then there's 4 bolts. You got to take the little grill out here on the rubber bumper cars, or the whole grill out of the chrome bumper cars, and go in through here. There's a bolt up top on each side, and then from underneath there's a bolt on either side on the bottom. Then this should tip in just far enough to get it past here, and you can just lift it right on out. But you can see right here where it's just all rotting out across here, and to a lesser extent on the outside there.